Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, Doctor Strange issue number 10, which is the 400th anniversary issue. Look, it's a big fat book. Don't get me wrong though, there's only a story in here, like the main story. There's only the one story in here that's actually continuing. It's the standard sized story, but there's a whole bunch of smaller stories afterward, including a bunch of redos of old stories, possibly the first story. And it's kind of sexy. It's kind of sexy. There's great tributes to that original art. So let's get started on this, guys. This issue is called Remittance. The writer is Mark Waid. Bunch of artists here. Jesus Sayez, who also did the cover, Kevin Nolan and Jim Campbell, Butch Juice and Carlos Lopez, Tom Palmer and Daniel Acuna. The letterer is VC's Corey Petit, and a bunch of variant cover artists. Sorry, love you all, but. And of course, Doctor Strange was created by a little bit by Stan Lee and a whole lot by Steve Ditko. That's by Stan Lee's own admission. Stan Lee didn't really believe in this character. Hey, even the great ones can make mistakes. Right? This was one thing that Mr. Stan Lee got wrong. Doctor Strange is effing amazing, and we just start off with. Kind of full circle. Strange talks about how, dude, when I first met the Ancient One, I was in this exact position of humility and begging him for his help. And he said yes. Well, I first said no, but you get the point. Doctor Strange doesn't do the same thing to the Ancient One, to Yao of Camartage. He says yes, and he does the best he can to help him. Now, we don't know why this happened, but some creature came and took the Ancient One's magic, and there's the price of magic thing. It's funny because the price of magic idea was just supposed to be something completely on its own. Now it's taking more on the life of John Constantine. You know what I'm saying? Now it's starting to feel a lot more like the John Constantine balance, that the symmetrical balance that magic needs. All right, more than just this was almost like a Wiccan form of magic. Almost like a law of threefold. Here, this is a lot worse. So the Ancient One, who was, I don't remember him originally being remitted to the astral plane. I remember him being an integral part of the universe, subservient to eternity himself, and yet still out there doing his own things, like a watcher over magic or the spiritual or the ethereal or whatever. But here, Mark Waid just, remands him to the astral plane in and of itself, and he gets pulled out by this guy who, it turns out, we know this guy, it's messed up. Anyway, this was pretty freaking interesting. I want you to harken back to what Baron Mordo said. He said he was working for someone, but he wouldn't say who, but he said it was higher than Dormammu. This is an interesting take on that, because he technically wasn't lying, but it's like a technicality technically. Dormammu is involved in this, but it's more than that. This was a fun comic book. I'm going to say this is borderline cerebral, which is a lot of what Mark Waid typically writes, I know there are a bunch of people who don't like the comic book, or they claim they don't like the comic book because Mark Waid's on and he's so mean to people. No, Mark Waid's mean to a-holes. That's who Mark Waid is mean to. There's a bunch of people who think they could just walk into a bank or a convenience store or a fast food restaurant, whatever, and call people jerks and a-holes and whatever the heck they want to call them, and then when the person turns around and says, you know what, I don't like you, I'm not going to serve you anymore, all of a sudden, oh, I'm being oppressed, I'm being repressed, I'm being oppressed, shut up. You're being an a-hole. That's what you are. And you're being called down on it. That's what's really happening. You're being called down on it. You want to talk about customer service. You're disingenuous, you're a jackass, and you clearly don't have two brain cells to rub against you amongst your entire clique, God forbid, within yourself. So there's that. Putting all that nonsense aside, and it is nonsense, you read this comic book and you start to, I don't know about start to, you'd have to be fairly new to comic books to start to realize just what a genius Mark Waid is. When it comes to comic books, man, this guy, he just has this way about him. You know what I'd like to see? And I wonder if this wouldn't make him, up there, because I'm going to talk about Bill Maher just a little bit here. Peter David put out, and you can go and look up this article. Peter David put out a response to Bill Maher, and it was pretty spot on. It was perfect. You know what I'm saying? Bill Maher, who's a partial owner of the Mets. You want to talk about, a bunch of crazy fans. Sport fans are some of the craziest fans out there. Absolute craziest fans out there. Painting, they're doing their own cosplay by painting themselves and going out practically naked. No, sometimes actually naked, streaking across fields and things like that, and paying exorbitant amounts of money to go to these big concert, whatever. But we can also talk about musicians and things like that. Hell, do you know what I wouldn't give to go to one last Wasp concert? I would just have to go to Europe to do that. And I just, no. Kind of done traveling. Wife and I were just talking about today. We're kind of done traveling. But like what I wouldn't give to go to a freaking Wasp concert and see Blackie Lawless, you know what I'm saying, doing anything off of the Crimson Idol or anything along those lines. Oh God, to see him do the Neon God Part 1 and 2, I would flip my lid. You know what I'm saying? I would flip my lid. But in this regard, even with, what's his name? A bunch of people talking to Bill Maher. But, Mark Waid, I would like to see him hero up a little bit and go on his show, Bill Maher's show, give him the oxygen that he so desperately needs, because Bill Maher is fading, his audience base is fading, and he's just doing something to try and remain relevant. At this point, his girlfriend, Ann Coulter, think about that. She's becoming more popular, more accepted than he is at this point, more relevant than he is. She actually is becoming more relevant than he is. So he's losing everything, and he's trying to do anything that he can. He's like, I got a lot of pushback from the comic book thing. I'm going to go out and do the comic book thing again. That's why he was on religion so much, because he got proper pushback from it. And you notice he doesn't talk about racism a whole lot anymore because, So it would be cool to see Mark Waid go in and have a conversation with Maher, because if Maher talks civilly, Waid would talk civilly. If Maher decides to amp it up, Waid will amp it up also. I would love to see that conversation. Yeah, I don't even care if it's on, I'd rather be on a neutral platform, but he could probably do it on Bill Maher's show. I think that'd be cool, just because, good luck finding somebody who's more knowledgeable and a bigger fan, true fan, older fan of comic books. And it shows here. It definitely shows here, because he's able to elicit things from the past that are just like, who remembers stuff like that? The only reason why I remember everything that was said in here was because Mark Waid reminded me of it in the book. I'm just like, oh yeah, I remember that. There's a lot of that in here. This is a good book for fans. Okay, good book, not just for comic book fans, but specifically Doctor Strange fans. I know for a fact, people who are not huge Doctor Strange fans from way back in the Ditko days and all that, I'm certain that they're going to have a whole lot of fun reading this comic book. But it's just that extra little, it's like it goes from 10 to 11 Spinal Tap version. If you are a longtime fan of Doctor Strange, if you've gone back and read a lot of those old school issues and whatnot, because there is a lot of callback to some of the older events that happened here. This was cool. And it's a Doctor Strange who, he really does pull out all the stops. The way he beats this dude at the end, it's Doctor Strange. It's that's Doctor Strange. Just he's kind of like a Roddy Piper. Just when you think that you master the rules, just when you think you learned all the rules, I changed the game. That's Doctor Strange. And that's exactly what he does here. Love it. Absolutely love it. This is a fantastic, and that's just the main story. I'm not even talking about all the other stories that came in. There's 4 more stories that come afterwards that are sparsely related, but they're a callback for the old school fans, or to remind you or to teach you if you don't know about that. I'm going to say right now, this is a good jumping on point for comic book fans of who want to get into Doctor Strange, just because a lot of these stories in here are actually callbacks to older stories, and they will teach you these older stories, but with new art that still kind of looks eerily similar to the original art, which is fantastic. If you're going to do a reboot, this is the way you do it. Reboot that art, baby. So yeah, I can't find a single flaw with this comic book except that it's not triple sized. That's the only problem I got with the comic book. And then I would say I'm upset that it's not, quadruple sized, and so on and so forth. Just wow. And I would pay for it too. This is a gorgeous book. Hey man, even comics have a price. All right, guys. Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.